Continuing, once you have the basic view box, there's going to be a number of other view boxes that you're going to want to do, just so you know. That's part of this bit. So what I'm going to do is you're going to realize that there's going to be more than one view box. There's going to be a number of views. And then there's going to be 3D views. That's why I showed you Sol, Photosynth, and PhotoFly from AutoCAD, and all kinds of all this photography stuff. So what I'm going to do at this point now is make this drawing 3D so you can then be aware, and then go through the same process, this time with a square box, because now maybe I don't want to just use one shape box, but using the golden rectangle and the square generally, and then putting circles inside of them and ovals inside of them, is probably a good way to keep things somewhat organized. This case, I really might not want. What I'm going to do is I'm going to build on this drawing, making some new layers. I'm going to go ahead and, if you remember, go to something. There's no extra layers here, so I can go to here and set my current layer to be object, and then click on here and say a new layer, and I'm going to call that 3D Mark 1 and 3D. I'm not actually doing it correctly, so I'm going to say 3D Mark 1, and then I'm going to click over here. It's already in use, so I'm going to say 3D Mark 2. Alright, I've just kind of given them some temporary names, 3D Mark 1, 3D Mark 2. I'm going to change their color so I can keep track of them to be blue and magenta. As the reason why you might do that is, remember, we don't want to put lines on top of lines, but when we do, we want to be in a new layer. So I'm going to just kind of continue this drawing a little bit. I'm going to go to 3D Mark 1. I'm going to remember layers, layers. The command's so great they named it twice. Somehow they got buried underneath this dimension toolbar here, so I'm going to move that around and dock it down here in the bottom perhaps. And I am going to go ahead and layer freeze at this point. I'm going to freeze the dimension layer, and I'm going to freeze the center line layer. And now I'm going to draft, just for grins, a line from the endpoint here to the endpoint there. And I'm going to draft a line from the endpoint here to the endpoint there. I've kind of filled in some lines, different layers. I'm going to go to here now and use that B poly command, the flood command, which is going to do something for me, which you'll see in a second. B poly. I'm going to use the polyline. I'm going to flood that, and flood that. These are now, you see the lines on top of lines. I now might want to actually go ahead and isolate just that layer, and that's all I've got. I've got some nice triangles, but I might want to cut some holes. Now we're starting to think what we might do in 3D here. Cut a hole there, cut a hole there, and cut a hole there. Now, how many entities are on there? Well, that's either a hole or a spike. I'm clicking each of these. They are each polylines, and these are actually circles. You now have something called circles, but you can go to the 3D world or the 2D world to get much more information by the command region. So I'm going to make each of those a region. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And now I can either subtract or add, but in this case I'm going to subtract. Subtract. Subtract, union, intersect. Those are the Boolean operations. I'm going to take that and subtract that from it. I'm going to take that and subtract that from it. Once again, subtract. The first question is, what do you want to subtract from? When you're done selecting, you hit a space bar and then you select that. Now what do we have? I've got 1, I've got 2, and I've got 3. All on this 3D Mark II layer. I can now do an extrude. and I'm going to extrude this one 2 units, this one 3 units, and this one 5 units. And all of a sudden, what's what? I don't really know. However, because this is turned, you really would think you're going to turn that first view. I'm going to avoid that step right now, and I'm now going to go to make my view box again. So I can go to layers here. You saw everything was turned off. I can unisolate, would be the first thing to do, is click on unisolate. That's going to turn everything back on. But in all reality, what I'd like to do is perhaps go to here and turn off everything. So I'm going to leave centerline off and dimension off. I don't want object on, so I really think about what I have on and off. And Mark 2 doesn't look like it should be on. Clicking over here, I'm going to go to Mark 1 and Mark 2, thing 1 and thing 2. And I've kind of started to organize my layers a little bit, and now that box even isn't so good for me, but I can go to my view box and I can make something perhaps that is in the order of, I don't know, at 7 by 7. Well, that doesn't work, a little bit small. So I could go ahead and actually do the at 10 by 10 again on the view layer. Click from here, at 10 comma 10. I'm going to move that box around. I don't move my thing, I move my camera. It looks reasonable, though it's not twisted in the correct direction. We will do that another time. Minus V for view, and I guess I'll call that top mark underscore top 1. You're going to see why in a second things get screwy here. So I want to say W for window, mark underscore top 1. Grab my first corner, shift right click from the, shift right click from the endpoint of that. Once again, didn't work. Minus V, W for window, mark underscore top 1. First corner, shift right click from the endpoint here. Shift right click to the endpoint there. My view is made, but now in all reality I don't want that view layer around, and I probably wouldn't have wanted it the last time, so I can change my current layer to anything I want. That's not the layer I want to freeze, and I want to turn that one off. I can now say L-man, and I can say new, and I can say my 3D views. Something that I'm going to remember, or views without view layer. So I've kind of isolated that. I hit close, and now we're pretty good to go as we go over here to ANSI A, right? Well, that sheet is still fine, even though some of the stuff that we did might not key back in. But if we wanted to go back, we could change the layer state to plot state and go on from there. But here I can now just right click, move or copy, move to end, create a copy, and this is going to be now, and then right click, rename 3D sheet. We now get to the crux of this, and there's a couple of videos, and I'm going to point out at this point Inventor does such a much better job than this, and Layout and SketchUp does such a better job. I'm loath to kind of show it, but I'm going to show it anyway so you can see how much views come in. I'm going to hit E for erase, get rid of that, make sure I'm on the correct layer, this correct layer being Viewport, and I'm going to make my first box the size that makes sense, though, you know, 5 isn't going to work when I get 3 views on here, and maybe, you know, 3 isn't going to work, so I'm going to just go ahead and do 2.5. I'm going to make a rectangle here. I'm going to go from here, I'm going to say at 2.5 comma 2.5. Why am I going to do that? Or I'm going to make a top view, a front view, and a side view off of that picture. How am I going to do that? The command then is, for first you're going to go ahead and do an mView, right, or view object. So in this case, we're going to do right click in any toolbar, brings up the set of toolbars. You convert your object, going to click that there. And of course, we're going to, even though it worked this time, we're going to go over here and say V for view, mark top one, set current, okay, and my guess is it's going to pop up to be something relatively normal here, which it is. You double click. Now here's the rub. The commands are Solview and Soldraw. I'm going to pause here, check the water, and be back. Remember again, the commands are Solview, Soldraw. Remember that Inventor does it better and Layout does it better. However, this is pretty sweet. SOL view. You want to do an orthographic view. You grab the side of the viewport. Click on there. Once again, you just grab the side of the viewport. No entity selected. I'm going to check what that is now. List. It's a polyline and a viewport. Ah, that makes it pretty interesting. I'm going to erase that. Doesn't let me do it. So we're going to check this. SOL view. We're going to do an orthographic side of viewport there. It doesn't let me do it. So I have a new thing. I can't necessarily, if I'm going to use the Solview and Soldraw, I have to make the viewport myself, which is pretty easy. I click there. I say at 2.5, comma 2.5. I do double click, V for view, mark top one, set current, okay. Click on that, and that's much better. You can see how it's black. It's in viewports, it would appear, so that kind of makes it interesting. I'm going to see if I can not have it on viewports. I can have it on the viewport layer. And now let's try this again. SOL view, ortho, grab the side to grab, yes, and then my view center is down here, and then I've got to give it, hit a return, grab one viewport and then the other, and give it a name, and that is the front. Okay, you're done. Now you do it again. Sol view, ortho, grab the side to project, go out over here, hit a space bar, grab from one to the other, and you start to see how many hidden lines and the like you have in there. View name is side. In all reality, you can go back here and erase this one and do it back again and say Sol view ortho, go from here on up, space bar, and then grab from here to here, and you've done what you need to do. The reason why you do that now, you'll see you're off here. The next command is Sol draw. Select that object, this object, and this object, and what it will do is will do all of your hidden lines for you, which is kind of crazy scary when you try to learn to do this by hand, as you will a little bit in the next couple of weeks. So views come at you in 17 different flavors. They are incredibly important, and they then get you to the point where all of a sudden, right, because I started correctly at 1 to 4 on this one, everything is 1 to 4 over here as well. So that really helps out as you're looking at multi-view drawings in odd scales. So as I go over here, realize that what it did is it projected information out to these planes that are defined by your 0 points on your drawing. So sometimes it's going to be important to move your object someplace else, and realize it didn't make a whole lot of sense to do this, right? It would be the last thing you do when you're printing, but you would really have either shifted your views or shifted this piece so it was orthogonal along your major planes. So that's what I got: Solview, Soldraw, and views.